Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Fuente and Meerapfel present Meet the Professor. Hello, world.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Mr.
¿Qué pasa,
Fuente.
Papo?
El Papo del Humo. In for the tip.
Good to see everybody. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about something that all of us are going to have something to say about it. We're going to go a little bit back in time. I mean, Carlito's older than me, but it doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
So today, we're going to talk a little bit, or a lot, how the market, and I mean, I can't go back to the 40s and the 50s, but at least the 60s, we can cover 60s, 70s, 80s, till today. So how has really the market evolved? Because we got to remember, we're going to take the Cubans out of this because we're not into that. But if we go especially after the embargo into the American market, I mean, let's face it, people were just smoking mild to medium, with some exceptions, some medium body cigars. Then the other thing was basically, it was a Maduro, it was Candela, it was Connecticut, it was Cameroon, and it was Indonesia. I mean, Carlito can correct me on this, but if from my memories, that was basically the 5 wrappers that in the 60s and the 70s was dominating. And then, of course, we'll get into later on companies like the Olivas, the Perez, and other people who started working with other different kinds of seeds and growing them in different countries. So, Papo del Humo, what do you remember from that?
I can't say maybe the late 60s, 70s, but only one I would add to that was Mexican Sumatra, Mexican tobacco.
Yep.
But, you know, you're absolutely right. Things have changed. I could definitely tell you that, you know, back from listening to my grandfather and my father, and even into the 60s and perhaps the 70s, the older generations that I remember, they were brand loyal. It was if you drank Pepsi Cola, that's what you drink, Pepsi Cola, not Coca-Cola or RC Cola or whatever. And they would, in that time, they used to smoke a lot of cigars. They would buy a box of cigars a week, for example, and they smoked 5, 6 cigars a day. And that was their brand. That was probably their father's brand or someone else's brand, and they passed on. That was their brand. It's much different than today when people try different cigars. Something else that a lot of people don't realize, that back in the 60s and probably 50s, the biggest selling wrapper in the United States was Candela wrapper or Fire Cured or green. And they used to use it was, you know, with Havana tobacco. But, you know, it's definitely evolved and changed. I know that everything is relative. And I do remember back in the early 70s, very early 70s, you know, when I was already working in the factory part-time and going to school and all that, 1970, 71, that I was enjoying cigars. There was a difference in some of the manufacturers that I knew that were back then considered the premium manufacturers that were made in Tampa. And that was my neighborhood. That's basically what I was mostly exposed to, because at that time I wasn't visiting smoke shops or, you know, or traveling or anything like that. And I do remember that there were some cigars that were blended a little heavier than others and so forth. But overall, you know, it's all relative. What was a very mild cigar back then or medium, maybe today's a cigar that's very, very, very light. And the one that was medium, you know, or that was heavy back then is probably medium today. But yeah, tastes have changed and the way one enjoys cigars has changed. Cigars are enjoyed seldomly, not the way that the professor enjoys cigars, or I enjoy cigars. I'm in the factory, and you know, this is our world. We're the chefs, and we're constantly tasting the meals and, you know, the recipes and so forth. But back then, people smoked a lot of cigars. Today, they choose when and where to smoke a cigar, and it's very, very personal. So it has changed. The trends have changed. The size of the cigars have changed. Wrappers have changed. somewhat, because you still have the classic wrappers, and hopefully they'll be around, you know, for generations. But you know, it's like everything else in the world, like all other things. And I think that it has truly changed for the best. There's no way that whether it's a handmade cigar or a long filler cigar made on a machine or whatever it is, that anyone could convince me that the cigars back in the 50s and the 40s were better made than the cigars that are being made today. Sometimes I'm presented with some really old cigars, and you know, they could say 100% Havana or clear Havana, made in Bond, made in Tampa by the big names and everything. But you go back and look at one of those boxes from the 50s and 60s and things like that, and I ask myself, how in the hell did manufacturers get away with it? But cigars were 50 cents. They were, you know, that was an expensive cigar. They were 26 cents, you know, 2 for a quarter and everything. People were not looking at, you know, under a microscope the way that people look at cigar today before they buy it. They were used to a certain taste and a certain house style. They relied on their brand, and they weren't looking at the little details like a vein here, vein there, a little dent here. You see some of those cigars, and it's so much different in the day. So things have changed, and I say it's changed for the better.
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, I've been smoking 54 years. I'm going to be honest, and I hope this doesn't get me in hot water. I personally believe in the last, I'm going to say 20 years, cigars are more rich, they're more complex, they're more balanced, they're more aromatic. You're picking more characteristics. Now, my evaluations of cigars in the past 20 years, the last 10 years, cannot be when I started to smoke, you know, when I was 14, 15, 16. I smoked cigars. I would go to Hochi's father's factory, make little cigars, little blends and things like that. But after 18, I really started to smoke a lot. But from my memories, when I really started to smoke a lot, and I see a smile on Carlito, and I mean, I hope I don't get the pink slip from both of you guys. But I think personally, I'm going to make kind of a bet. I think cigars in the last 20 years, and if you want even the last 15 years, are more rich, more complex. They have more to add it. Now, that said, there are brands that have been out there for a long time that have kept that consistency because they grow the same tobacco, they buy the same tobaccos and that. But I'm talking about an overall picture of the industry, because we got to look at the overall industry and we got to look at certain brands. And we don't go into brands here, but we know what are those 2 mainly brands that for a long time have kept up that consistency. Am I still working?
Yes. I also like that, you know, I'm not smiling because of what you're saying. I'm smiling because of something that just came to my mind, and something we didn't mention, and it relates so much to what you're saying. It's the vocabulary of cigars. It's the way we describe them. It's a whole different world that we live in today. And I'm still trying to learn a different language, because how many times people tell me, hey, what do you put in this? What soil? Hey, did you grow it on? And this and that. What's in this? And I say, tobacco. Tabaco. Eso tiene tabaco. And it's just, we talk about, you know, we owe this to, you know, to Cigar Aficionado and every other tasting, rating, magazine, the blogs, and all of a sudden, you know, we're describing cigars with, you know, with a hint of walnut, with peppery, but not only pepper. Sorry, my little studio just dismantled. But not only pepper, but they describe it white pepper or cayenne pepper or this, and you know, it's so different. And when I was growing up, you know, and I was, you know, tobacco was either, you know, it was bitter, it was sweet, it was powerful, it was, you know, it was enjoyable. Sour. Yes. And, you know, you know, that it stimulates your saliva or whatever, you know, what is watery in your mouth, salty, you know, all these different tastes, you know, bitter, sharp, but smooth, metallic, you know, yes, of course, smooth, or, you know, But now we have all these descriptions and everything, which was very difficult for me in the beginning to adapt. And today I realize how important it has been and how it's contributed to the growth, the change, to the complexities of blending. And it's an entire new world. And I think that it's been very positive for people understanding cigars, tobacco, and having something to relate to, and not only in their personal enjoyment, but in conversation with other of different tasting notes, what one finds, how one likes to pair a cigar with a certain spirit or, or food or so forth. And it just makes it that much more exciting. And it's something that I've had to adapt to. And it's very difficult to teach an old dog a new trick, but I'm still learning. I got there's a few, maybe 3 or 4, sensations or flavor or associations that I could kind of adapt to. But some of the other ones, I haven't figured it out yet. But, we'll leave that to the younger generation.
Well, the one that always shocked me was something I saw on Twitter one day that the guy said, well, this cigar from this company, was medium to full. It was spicy, bada bing, bada ba. And in the finish, it had a hint of blueberry muffin. And I DM'd the guy on Twitter and I said, come on. He said, I said it as a joke. I said, that's gone viral, man. You're going to get your ass whipped because of that.
No, he was probably eating a blueberry muffin while he was enjoying his cigar. But, one of the ones that I heard, and people might have thought that saw it in social media or in some, I don't remember where it was, but it was many years ago when they say, it's got this smell. At least this reminds me of barnyard doo-doo, crap. And, mierda. And I thought to myself, shit, that's a compliment, sometimes that could be a compliment. And, there's so many different ways to describe it, but it's important, what you find in a cigar, if you enjoy it. And if you find nothing at all but just pleasure, that's good enough.
Carlito, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know if I ever told you this, and we're going to make it public. I hope I don't get into trouble. 3 or 4 years ago, I went to the factory, with our dear friend, with Samuel. And I was touring the factory and all that. And that I have been in many, many aging rooms in many countries. And I got to tell you something. When I went into the aging room of Opus, I can guarantee you, and this is no BS, I have never been in a room that really impressed me that much. I know it's Spanish cedar and all that, but to me, it was all those old cigars with 8, 10, maybe 20 years old that brought something to me that just brought me back in time. And I've maybe told this to a couple of people, and I don't know what it is. I can't remember who said it to me one day that had visit there and asked me. I said, look, I haven't been there in a long time. But to me, and this is not because I work with you, but I'm friends with you, or Jeremiah's here, or Melanie, or whatever. That room has something that no other aging room. Look, I've been in a lot of great aging rooms. Don't get me. But that particular one of the Opus has something that I have never, ever perceived or experienced in my life.
You're probably right. And it's something that probably is very difficult to pinpoint what it is, but I won't doubt it if it's those guardian angels that are standing outside that gate, that door, that are walking there and enjoy cigars at night, because that room is guarded with all the, with all the chiefs and queens and every tobacco goddess in the world. But no, the room does have a different aroma. As a matter of fact, if you go into the Hemingway aging room, you'll sense a different aroma. If you walk in the Opus or the Magnum Mars, it's incredible how they have different, different aromas. The room, they're slightly different. That for someone that's a novice, they may all smell like tobacco, but that for those who have experience will definitely detect the differences in aromas that are in these different rooms that contain different cigars at different humidities and different temperatures.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, to be honest, but it really, The two times I've been actually in that room, I was really impressed. You know, something we were talking in the beginning with Jeremiah.
Well, something that you just reminded me, never let you go in that room again, because if you left impressed the last time, I don't want to take any chances that would change.
No, it's not going to change. And I can't decide what's done at the factory, but I can tell you something. I would not touch that room, even if they offered you $1 billion. That has to stay the way it is. Because the aroma in that room, the sensation that you have, I think you could bring in somebody blindfolded there and take him to the other rooms, and I can guarantee you, if he's a real cigar smoker, he'll pinpoint that room all the time.
Obviously, yes, I agree.
Listen, one thing we were talking about, and we've never talked about on the show, and it's good for us to talk different topics. You know, we always talk about this rapper, that rapper, bada bing, bada bang, what people like. But if you look at social media, the rapper that you're going to see the less publicized, and in my opinion, it's more than maybe 50 or 55% of the total sales is Connecticut, where it's a Connecticut, USA, or Connecticut, Honduras, or Connecticut, Ecuador. The majority of the people, even if they don't make a big bang of it, it's basically Connecticut, Connecticut, Connecticut. I mean, I don't want to mention brands, but if you put all those brands from those big companies together, and I mean, I know we do a good amount of Connecticut too, but Connecticut really is the dominant wrapper of the industry.
I agree with you, Professor. Connecticut is the dominant wrapper. There's no question about it. When you consider all the Connecticut grown in different countries, the Connecticut in Connecticut, and all the premium cigars, Connecticut has been, for decades and decades, you know, the most popular wrapper in North America.
But the thing about it is, if you go to social media, you hardly see anybody posting about it. If you go to the ratings, I don't remember the last time I saw on the top 5, there's never been a Connecticut that I can remember, even though it's a big seller. But let's face it, social media has changed everything. But even though social media, the last 8 or 10 years have been popular, let's go a little bit back in time. The guys that really, you know, were outspoken, that would talk, that to go to the cigar shop, whether it was to brag or to educate it, you never saw them with a cigar with a Connecticut wrapper. It was always this brand or that brand or this guy or that guy. So it's something that I've talked to a lot of consumers when I do my seminars, and the guys always that approach me after the seminar are the guys that smoke mild and smoke Connecticut. They're kind of shy. And I tell them there's nothing wrong with that. With a Connecticut cigar, with a cigar with a Connecticut wrapper, what are you looking for? For something that's creamy, that's smooth, that has flavor. Because at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, a cigar is all about flavor. The strength, whether it's a 5, a 6, a 7, or a 9, or whatever, it depends on what you like. But to me, when people ask me, what's the most important thing to you? Well, there's actually 3 things. Consistency, consistency, consistency. But on the blend, it's flavor overall.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. This is coincidental. And I didn't know you were going to bring this subject up. But I'm enjoying the Connecticut cigar now. And it's very, very flavorful. It's delicious. And I wouldn't want it stronger than what this cigar is right now, because they would throw it out of balance. And right now I'm enjoying it as much as any great cigar I could enjoy. And it's
Can I have a puff?
It's yeah, of course you can't hear, try, but it's just refreshing that if you smoke a certain cigar and everything, and our last show I was smoking a Don Carlos, and there's such a difference in body and personality and so forth, but it's delicious. I mean, I'm enjoying this cigar that if I would smoke this cigar more often, then that's probably will be my go-to cigar. And it's a lot what you get accustomed to and so forth. But what I find interesting that is different, that it's like ice cream flavors, that you could move around and everything when you have an urge for a certain thing and try it. And I tried it for a different reason, because I smoke different cigars and just make sure that the consistency and so forth and checking it. But this cigar that I'm smoking, I'm enjoying it tremendously. And you mentioned about strength, I think the strength has a lot to do also with your blend and how you balance it with your wrapper and your binder. And you can make a cigar with Connecticut, and it doesn't necessarily have to be mild.
No, I agree. Because people, I've said this for years and years, people tend to confuse flavor with strength. You could have a mild cigar that's full flavor.
And further,
probably that cigar that you're smoking is a full flavor cigar. It's not full body, it's not medium, it's a mild, probably me knowing more or less the way you like to blend, I would say it's mild to medium, very creamy, very smooth, hints of sweetness, a little bit of notes of a nice bitterness, not bitterness, but the bitterness that's a characteristic of all Connecticut, whether it's Connecticut, Ecuador, or Connecticut, USA, and that's what people understand. A slight bitterness is nice in the Connecticut. That's the main characteristics
it's like
of it.
Like a dark chocolate that maybe you prefer, that's not that much, it doesn't have that much sugar. That is because this has sweetness and it has that little taste, that tang. It's more like a tang.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, and I think that a lot has to do with the blend. And one thing also that I thought of, that people make mistakes. You can't judge the color of a wrapper with the strength of the cigar. A cigar could have a dark wrapper and be pretty mild or smooth or bland. And it could have a light wrapper and knock you, get you dizzy. It's, it depends on a lot of the blend and the combination of different tobaccos that are used.
No, I agree. It's funny because that's one of the first things I do in my seminars. I tell people, never judge a cigar by the color of the wrapper. And I tell people, I can go into a shop that has a good selection, pick up 50 cigars with a light wrapper that are stronger than Maduros. Because what does Maduro mean? It's just ripe. It's the fermentation process, a natural fermentation process that you will do with heat and water to uniform, the colors of the wrapper. And I don't want to mention brands, but I can tell you, in my opinion, the majority of Maduros are just medium to full. There's very few Maduros that are cigars that are going to really give you a buzz, in my opinion.
And I would like to say, if you're smoking a cigar to get a buzz, you're smoking the wrong type of tobacco.
It's funny how the world is. This is the first time in all of all the shows we've done, that had an urge to smoke the cigar. I don't even know what it is. But it's funny how I'm going today full flavor, full body, and Carlito's experimenting with something that's really mild. Jeremiah, necesito oír tu voz.
This is a show for me. I get to sit back and listen to the two of you and learn something. No, I agree with both of you. I think that in terms of tobaccos used and in terms of the varieties, I think Carlito said it's spot on. It's like going to Baskin and Robbins and being able to experience all of these different flavors and experiences. However, when we spoke earlier on about the industry and about flavors and about variety and about quality, I do have a slightly different opinion. I think that the industry today is Jekyll and Dr. Hyde. I think that and I agree with Carlito and yourself, there's the best that's ever been produced. And I think the industry has reached a level, at least in my lifetime, I've just seen it become better and better and better, and the products have become better and better and better. However, I also see that has opened the door to the darker side. I see more and more companies putting more and more importance in marketing, putting more and more importance in image. And whereas when I was a small kid, a lot of these little family businesses were simply focusing on quality and simply focusing on trying to, let's say, beat the others just in terms of the product leaving the back door of the factory. today the war has shifted to perception and shifted to the bigger industry, the bigger picture. And I'm far from saying that this is a game played throughout, but what I am saying is that there definitely is more of a spread. There definitely is more of a contrast between, you know, the Jackal and the Mr. Hyde.
Jeremiah, you're becoming more and more the Godfather every day.
Yeah.
Carlito, let me ask you a question. Did you ever use from Indonesia TBN?
Jose, I put my hand on any book you want me to put, and I'll go in front of any deposition and risk of perjury. We had never used 1 pound of Indonesia in the history of our company.
Okay, I ask you because today I was researching a little bit about different tobaccos.
When I say Indonesia, I mean TBN, of course.
Okay. Because I was researching today, I don't know why, somebody asked me a question, and I remember that they had their Sumatra, they had Besuki, and they had the TBN, because there's a company, and I'm not going to mention it, that still uses a lot of TBN, and I remember the days of the boom that people were after tobacco from Indonesia like there was no tomorrow. It's just out of curiosity.
No, during the boom, I think that TBN or Indonesia became one of the most popular wrappers on most cigars. I'm not talking about the big major brands, but on a lot of new cigars and everything, because Connecticut was not available because it was committed to the big companies. Cameroon was not available because it was committed to certain companies. And there was not that much at that time, you know, different wrappers and so forth. And Nicaragua was not growing wrappers. A turmoil was coming from some from Honduras, some from Ecuador, but at a, you know, much less amount than today. And everybody went to Indonesia. And I remember being at different events, seminars, big panels with big major manufacturers. And I'm just thinking of one brand I won't mention, but they're not in business today. And there was a no brand. Somebody up there talking about Indonesia and everything and promoting it and saying that, because I had mentioned we don't use Indonesia, and I was on that panel, and I was kind of embarrassed. But in a sense, I'll tell you the outcome. That person said, you know, Indonesia is really good tobacco, but you have to be knowledgeable in blending, know how to blend it. In other words, and that was after I said that we were not using Indonesia, that we were doing everything humanly possible to stick to the classics. And it was, you know, I was the young kid on the panel, and this was an old Cuban, you know, maestro. So, you know, I thought to myself, but I know that there's one person sitting, you know, there in Brussels that always, he was taught by his father, the way I was taught by my father, the classics. And, you know, as long as we could, man, we fight, you know, we're fighting like hell, you know, the situation with Connecticut, the writing's on the wall, and it's heartbreaking, you know, when you think about Connecticut growing in the Connecticut River Valley, when you have the, you know, the big families like the Colemans no longer growing tobacco, and you have the Trolls that were the biggest farmer, you know, I think they're like 12 generations, 10 generations, the oldest American farming family. And, you know, things have just gotten very difficult for that reason that Jeremiah has mentioned, the Godfather, as I say. And the reason that they're not growing those wrappers is because a lot of the companies have moved to wrappers, alternative wrappers that are less expensive and yield better. And that has created a big burden for these families that can't just grow for the premium side, which is a very, very small percentage of the tobacco that they grow. That's why one of the reasons that I wanted to make cigars again that were balanced, that use different tobaccos from the entire plant. It's one of the reasons why I came out with the Magnum Mars, was because for that reason, because I saw the industry going to one direction, and I knew it would not be good for anyone by using only certain leaves of the plant. And And the same thing is happened to Connecticut. It did not have the support. And today, it's very, very little that is grown, less and less. And, you know, it's cost prohibitive practically because of the United States and the cost, plus the land, these farms in the middle of Hartford and so forth. You know, the value in real estate is just incredible. There's development everywhere. And, you know, as generations go on, it's just, you know, it's so tempting, you know, to sell that land and develop it.
Yeah, that's majority of people, when we talk about Connecticut, that's what they've said. A lot of companies wanted to go to other countries, get $10, $15 less a pound of wrapper. But also, to be honest, you hit it right on. It's the value of the land. I mean, how much money can you really make on that, you know, growing tobacco compared to the millions and millions of dollars you can get for a farm for development?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And for that reason, I think that that consumers should really understand this and appreciate the, you know, the dedication, the commitment that in the agriculture aspect of farmers that have dedicated to the soil, to the land, and everything to bring enjoyment to millions of people around the world. I mean, to me, it's making cigars is one thing, growing it is another, and fermenting and so forth. I mean, they're all it's all interlocked and it's all very important. But farming is just so difficult under today's world, today's situation. I mean, there's something that you can't control is the weather, and anything from, we know what happened with blue mold. We heard the story from the Torrents. We heard it from Nestor Andres Plasencia. And not only blue mold, but any kind of disease or weather, hurricanes in the Caribbean, situations, you know. Tobacco is not grown in Dubai, unfortunately, where they could probably, you know, grow it aside with the conditions, you know, they could duplicate nature with the, you know, so forth. Tobacco is grown in very, very difficult areas that sometimes are very difficult to get through under very difficult conditions. And it also includes politics and everything else, and, you know, and on all sides, from regulations, from governments, from, it's just, it's very, very challenging to be able to produce consistently good, decent, dependable tobacco. And for that, you know, I have the highest respect for all the agronomists, for all the tobacco farmers. And it is so nice for me to see in the last decade, maybe a little longer, but most of the next decade, families like the Meerapfel, Plasencia, you know, Torrents,
Oliva,
of course, yes, Oliva, and Paris, and all of them being recognized in the industry, because in the past, and even with Plasencia, like he said, you know, they grew the tobacco for all these great brands, but they never had a chance to. One of the most enjoyable part of the industry is to be out and meet the people who actually enjoy their hard work and be able to build a lifelong friendship with them and you know, hug them, and I think that's the most rewarding. That's what ties the circle, the ring, is from, you know, going from seed all the way, like they say, from seed to smoke. And this is very, very rewarding, you know, and to me, it's very enjoyable to see these names and these families who have sacrificed for us, the manufacturers, to be able to give us a product that we're able to bring to the consumers. And they definitely deserve all the recognition, as much, if not more, than any manufacturer.
You know, talking about growing right now, I don't know, this came to mind right now, and this question goes to you, El Papo. Let's go back to Chateau de la Fuente, first crop. You did the seedlings, you did the transplant, you started to pick, tobacco started to go in the curing barns. When you saw that tobacco hanging in the curing barns and it started to go, from green to yellowish to the brownish. I don't know if you've ever been asked this question or not. I want you to tell us today, because you know, we're making history. And when you, me, Jeremiah, Melanie, we're all gone, people are gonna go down to YouTube and see all this stuff. What, that first leaf that you took in your hand, how did you feel?
Professor, first of all, I have to confess that my hands are sweating with cold chills. My heart, when you started speaking, started pounding. I have to go back before to the year 1990, 91, that we asked Oliva on that farm to grow Cuban seed wrapper for us. And they said that it was not feasible because Cuban seed yields so little, and that it would be almost impossible or very difficult to take wrapper out. We committed to buy the whole farm if they would try, because I was looking for that type of tobacco. And they grew the whole farm, but I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive, if I remember correctly, Loto Cubano. And I remember that when we saw that tobacco, we didn't get one bale of wrapper. It was just not enough. I mean, you could take some wrappers out if you take wrapper out of filler, but it was sun-grown. It was sun-grown. It wasn't shade or anything, it was sun-grown. And we didn't get wrapper, but I wanted that so bad that I looked at the leaves that had a little bit of sheen and like this. I go, look, Dad, look, we could get wrapper out of the wood. So I went back to Angel Oliva and Johnny and Angel Oliva Jr. Beachy back then, who Beachy was very much involved. I say Beachy, that's his nickname, Angel Oliva Jr. And I went back to Don Angel and I said, Don Angel, I want, you know, this is promising, but what I really want is shade grown, you know, grown in shade, because we're in the Caribbean, the sun is very hot and everything, tobacco comes out thick for wrappers. I want shade grown, but I want a wrapper seed, like the ones that you grew in La Esperanza farm in Jalapa, where Danilo Moncada was and everything. Well, Danilo Moncada ended up being 20 years with us over here, and he was sent down. But I remember that, and he says, Carlito, this farm is too small, and it's impossible for us to do this because the investment will be so huge, and we might get so little wrapper out of it, that if you really believe in this, you take over the farm. You take over the farm if you really believe, because you're gonna have a lot of children, and most of them are gonna be ugly. But because they're your children, you're gonna love them all the same, and you'll find a home for. We cannot, as a company that sells, we cannot do this, sell tobacco to you on this condition, because we have nothing to do with the rest. And I remember the first year we took over was a crop, 1991, 92, that we took over, and it was very, very small. They sent Danilo Moncada from Nicaragua to assist us here with Ariosto Mendez, who was at the farm at that time, and now is the general manager, head guy in Fuente. But to teach us the distancing, the shade, how to put up the poles, and because Danilo had done this all his life in Jalapa and worked with the Olivos all his life. So all this thing, I remember the first crop. Remember the tobacco got knocked down with the wind, whirlwinds and everything. Let me tell you, Jose, it was a disaster, to be honest with you. It rained so much. It looked like we were planting rice, not tobacco, with the puddles and everything. And, all the dips and all the, unevenness of the soil and everything. It was really bad. But even in bad, you find good. And I remember that first crop. I remember looking at tobacco and everything, and and it was wrapper. It was wrapper, very small amount, because most of it ended up being short filler or a lot of binder. But there was something unique about it, and it was the elasticity, the oils, and how when you got that tobacco, it reminded me of bat wings. That they're, you see them close and all of a sudden they start opening up and everything, and flowers. And it was promising. And we were able to get a small, very small percentage of some wrapper. But to give you an idea, and I think Jeremiah, any wrapper grower would understand this. In the first years, especially first years, the tobacco that we used was the very top of the plant that we were able to take our wrappers, because everything from the middle down was almost like onion skin. It was so thin and it didn't have life. It could only be used as binders. Didn't have the elasticity, didn't have the hold. And we started with soil analysis and so forth. And we realized, I didn't realize, we had experts to come in, that we had a serious situation with the drainage. And so with lasers and everything, we started working on drainage, started on the land, doing the French drainage. And we even had to build under every tobacco barn, there's these big cement tubes that come from the hills or mountains right next to it. For when the rain comes in, it goes into a certain area and it goes under the tobacco barns in these tubes that drains out. It doesn't, because I remember the first year it was raining a lot, and when we went to put the fire to be able to take the humidity out of the barns, tobacco started falling from the poles. And we were boiling tobacco, we were scorching, because the water was running underneath the tobacco barns, was so close to the earth that the heat would just bring up the vapor of the water and we're boiling our tobacco. We went through hell and back. To say that in the very beginning was easy, it wasn't. But I never forget the day that a young man named Michael Frank came to visit, that was sent by Mr. Gordon Mott to do journalism and everything. And he said that the minute that barn door opened, Carlito was like a little boy on Christmas Eve waiting to receive his toys. And I was, and it was very hopeful, but it was also heartbreaking, because it took us, quite a few years of continuously investing in the farm, reinvesting, improving, reinvesting, improving, reinvesting, from drainage to organics, to with all the organics, where today you look at a second priming and it's elastic and oily and so forth. And you look at a third priming, and that's where we started with Angel Share, because in the beginning we couldn't do this. Those weren't wrappers, but and I contribute that to the organics. I really do. I remember that when we bought these scientists, engineers, agronomists, soils, and the experts, people that are very, very respected, they discovered an element that was not found in that soil. Is very important for tobacco. And things like that we started implementing slowly. But the pH on the farm has always been perfect. It's been ideal. But I remembered that I said, listen, I want to use organics. They prepared formulas that were commercially prepared formulas. And I kept on arguing that I want to use organics, because I talked to all the old farmers. And I remember my grandfather saying, I remember everybody talking, and the old farmers. And I remember speaking to Frank Zara and everything. He says, in the Dominican Republic, you guys are growing corn. You're not growing tobacco. And I said, why do you say that? And he wasn't referring to our farm. He was referring to general. He said, because the fertilizer you're using is corn fertilizer. Tobacco, you have to use organics. All these things were in the back of my mind, from some of these people. And we started bringing in cottonseed meal and all these different meals and palm meal and accumulating a lot of natural organic fertilizer, which you know what that means. Smells good when it gets wet and let it decompose and everything. But I remember the specialists, the soil specialists and everything, who were educated in the Carolinas and Virginia and the best schools. And, they're the ones that prepare all the formulas and do the soil analysis, telling them that I wanted to use organics. And he told me, Carlito, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money, because I cannot control how many particles per square foot or square meters of nitrogen or magnesium, potassium with organics, because I could measure some of the organics, but it changes because it's not all the same. It doesn't come from the same source. It doesn't whatever. And I don't recommend it. It doesn't work. And I said, but my grandfather did it, the great-grandfather, all the old timers, it was organics. They used a lot of natural fertilizer. And he says, and I said, listen, my grandfather, I remember saying these words. He used to tell me that the puerco, the pork in Cuba, tastes different than what we eat in America. He said, in North America, he says it tastes different and everything. The food was different because the pork used to eat the palm kernels, the kernels from the palm. It was all natural. So everything, and the chicken ate natural corn, and the chickens taste better and everything. So I remember using that example with the scientist, and he says, Carlito, it doesn't work for plant life. Plant life is not animal life. What you feed it is not what you're going to taste and not what it becomes. So I insisted of doing what I wanted to do, maybe because of romanticism or whatever, or, the trust I had in these old timers. But I'm going to tell you this, Jose. Within 6 years of us using that, our organics and everything, these people started advising other people growing tobacco to use something that we were using. So I guess I was not too wrong. And the soils have changed completely and everything. And things have changed, but I'm not going to say it was ever easy. And I'm not going to say it's still easy. We've had some very difficult times with, seasons and everything. And every year is almost like giving birth to a new baby. Is that tension? Is that anxiety? Then how's everything going to come out and everything? And even though things could start a good way, in the middle it could go terrible, in the end. But it's just the most rewarding thing when you see tobacco that comes out beautiful, and that that someone's going to enjoy it. I mean, there's no greater feeling. It's it's part of you. It's what you are, and you brought out something that some things I don't want to remember but overall it's been fantastic. It's been a dream come true to tell you the truth.
Let me ask you this. I've been smoking for a while, and I used to do pure grades with different wrappers and things like that. I could be mistaken. I've had this conversation with people who have good palates. You can confirm this or not. I don't think there's wrappers that have similarities. And I attribute this not so much to the seed, but to the soil. I don't think there's a wrapper that you could say tastes even close to what a wrapper on the Opus is. What's your opinion on this?
No, I totally agree. I mean, if not, I would make more cigars. I would just buy more land and keep doing, and we have. But we grow, 4 different seeds, sometimes 3, and 4 maximum. And I grow seeds that are for binder, and that seed is grown on other parts of the country, here in the Dominican Republic. It doesn't taste anything, and it doesn't come out. Our tobacco, because it's sandy, loamy soils. Our binders come out thin. They come out sweeter. The veins are thinner and everything. The problem is I don't have enough land, because if I had enough land, I would grow I would grow 3 times more. But we're limited in what we could grow. And every time that I grow binder, because we use it on certain cigars, every time I grow, I sacrifice acreage growing that binder. That's how much less wrapper that I'm growing. And every time we grow sun-grown also for the same thing. And it's just like, we decide every year how much we're going to grow one seed and so forth. But we want to, as much possible, grow the wrappers for the Fuente Opus X, and that we use on other cigars also.
Yeah, I've always had that curiosity, because I smoke a lot of stuff from a lot of people. I firmly believe that you really know how good your cigar is when you smoke other stuff. But I can tell you, in my years of smoking, because I've done it, I've taken, just smoked the wrapper alone. And it has a characteristic that doesn't taste like a Sumatra, doesn't taste like a Cameroon, doesn't taste like a Connecticut, doesn't taste like a Negro Sun. It's very, I think the Opus wrapper has its own identity, because we have to face it. There's wrappers coming out of, let's say, Ecuador, even Nicaragua. They have a lot of similarities to it. But with the Opus wrapper, I think it's very, very unique in my very humble opinion.
You know, it could be contribute to a lot of things. Jose. I think also the curing that takes place there when the conditions are normal, the curing there, the natural curing, the way the humidity, the natural humidity that surrounds those curing barns, I think has, you know, every little detail. It's hard to, I mean, I can't measure it. I can, and who could? But I think that it's every little detail has an influence on the overall outcome. The soil, but you know how it's harvested, the seeds, the tobacco on the original land tastes different. Not extremely different, because I mean they're a block apart, because you know it's a lot of acreage. But when you go to the part that is nicknamed San Luis, that where the Gritos at, the tobacco on the open field is a lot heavier. It's heavier. It's more robust. And then you have areas that are completely surrounded. There's one that we call La Reina, that is like a crown. It's a ring. It's round, and it's surrounded. It's got the streams around it, and you got vegetation all around it, where you know you hardly don't need shade. You know, because you have so much shade of so many hours of the day. And all the tobaccos, the amount of sunlight and everything, whether it's near the mountains or it's in the middle of the field, it has an influence on the overall tobacco. It's whether it's noticeable or not noticeable, I think we're nitpicking to say, but there's definitely a difference when you compare one right next to another.
That's fascinating. I mean, at the end of the day, we've talked with experts that we've had on the program, and I think we all agree on that. You can have the greatest seed in the world, but it's my personal opinion. I've said it for years, and I've learned, and I still keep asking and learning. It's all about the soil.
You know, and the more I listen to you, Professor, the more I agree with you. It is the soil. No question about it. Soil has a lot to do with it. And obviously, you pointed out many reasons why it is. If not, you know, we've grown our same seed in other areas where we take out sun-grown wrappers, and it's not the same. It's not the same. It's heavier. It's got more veins. That elasticity that you see on the wrappers from Chateau Fuente with our Havana seed, that elasticity that you see and so forth, the oils, and you know, that is definitely different. It's definitely different than when you grow it in another area, which is a drier climate and everything. So it's a very, very difficult area to grow tobacco, because it's the area of the country where you get the most rainfall per year. And it's in like a microclimate that the farm is located. It's got one of the main rivers that runs right through it. It's got a lot of streams that come off the mountains and everything. So if we got a really difficult rainy year, it's going to be very difficult. If you got a year that's on the drier side, you're going to have delicious tobacco and everything. And it's something that we face and everything. That's why, you know, it's just not something that we could turn on the faucet and say, we're going to make so many Fuente Pasex or so many, you know, Destino Siglos or Don Carlos Aniversario, all the other cigars that we use that wrapper on. You know, it's something that it just depends on how much aged tobacco in our inventories and what we're able to replace that inventory with.
Definitely. Jeremiah, I think you can wrap everything up today. I think we had a great session. I mean, from Carlito, and I think we reviewed pretty much how our industry has changed, and I think it'll still continue to change.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, there's no session without a little joke, and this time it's going to be from Rich's Baked. Rich, you're on air.
I'm half-baked, but that's another story. Today's story is about a poor next-door neighbor I had who was told by his doctors at the hospital that he only had one night left. And they moved him into this beautiful hospice suite, and they pumped him up full of steroids. They pumped him up full of painkillers, so his last night would be relaxing. And it was a beautiful room at the hospital, and his wife was there. And while the doctor was not looking, he popped several of those little blue pills that some guys use. And the doctor left, and his wife said, "Honey, is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable?" He said, "Yeah, I don't feel so bad right now with all the stuff they gave me. Why don't you jump in the bed with me here, and we can have a go at it?" Well, she says, "Well, I guess so." And they get in there, and they're like 13, 19-year-old kids, wild, crazy. Sheets are flying, things are wild and everything. And a few minutes later, she finally gets up and goes and cleans up and comes back. "How was that?" He said, "It wasn't bad, but I still feel pretty good. Why don't we go at it again?" She says, "Geez, again? All right." And they go at it again, and it's wild, crazy sex. Everything is wild, and she finishes up, and they leave. And she leaves the bed, he comes back and says, "Honey, come on, let's go. Three's a charm." She goes, "You got to be kidding me." Jumps into the sack with him, going at it like crazy, wild and crazy sex. And they finish up, and she starts to walk away. He says, "Wait a minute, one more time." She says, "What are you, crazy? You don't have to get up in the morning."
Very good. Thank you very much, Rich.
All right.
Rich, thank you, Rich. Big hugs.
You're
brother.
welcome, Arnold. Okay.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the day. Before we leave, please remember that Friday is, in my opinion, the show that I'm looking the most forward to watching, because there is going to be no other than the future of the male Fuente lineage, Carlos Fuente III, coming on. This is going to be a hell of a show, and we're all looking forward to it. At least I am, that's for sure. And I'm sure all of you as well. Please remember that this was our last Tuesday. As of now, we're going to have this Friday, and then we're jumping on to Sunday shows, which should be wonderful and convenient for everybody's schedule. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and of others, and we'll see you this Friday for Fuente and Meerapfel present Meet the Professor. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
So long, everyone.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye now.